Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Bertino.
And Patrick, tonight we are diving into the new horror film that was pulled from the theatrical schedule, which was not very happy news for us because we are very much Brian Bertino fans, and instead dropped on Paramount Plus this past weekend, a little film from Brian Bertino called Vicious.
Yes, Damon. Vicious released on Paramount Plus in October of 2025, starring the likes of Emily Mitchell as Allie, Clea Scott as Neighbor Woman, Devin Nakota as Tara, Rachel Blanchard as Lainey, Mary McCormick as Mother, Catherine Hunter as the Woman, and starring Dakota Fanning as Polly. As you mentioned, Damon, written and directed by one of our favorites, Brian Bertino. Vicious is here, Damon, and we were very excited for this film, especially me. I'm a big Brian Bertino guy, and I think honestly it's because of what he's done with contained horror specifically. I haven't seen all of his films. I haven't seen The Monster or whatever that is, and there's a couple others in there that I haven't seen. But everyone knows The Strangers and the original Strangers, nothing with the chapters in it, and and then we've seen The Dark and the Wicked, which I still hail as one of the scariest films I've ever seen. Someone just asked me last night, what's a scary movie? And I said The Dark and the Wicked. That's a scary ass fucking movie. So Brian Bertino has delivered I think a generational classic in The Strangers, and B, one of the scariest films I've ever seen in The Dark and the Wicked. So you got to imagine how excited I was to find out that he had a cast with Dakota Fanning at the head and and something coming out in the theaters because it's been a while for him. Damon, what do we have on our hands here with Vicious? I don't want to bury the lead, but this is different. This is a different scenario than the last few times we talked about a Brian Bertino joint.
I didn't really think about it, but you're absolutely right. He loves to do self-contained horror, and I love isolation horror. It's one of my favorite. I guess it's a subgenre. It's not really a genre, but a subgenre of
Sure.
like isolated, contained horror
It's a
in a
template,
house
I
or
would say.
in
It's
a
more, yeah, it's
room.
more like a template of
Yeah,
horror.
and I dig that. I dig those isolated, like contained horror stories. And I just realized, looking at his filmography, The Strangers. The only one of his movies I haven't seen that he's directed. He's directed one, two, three, four, five movies. I've seen four of them. I never saw Mockingbird. I did see The Strangers. I think everyone's seen The Strangers. I did see The Monster, actually, because I remember after I saw The Big Sick, if you remember that movie, the one Kumail Nanjiani did, that was based on the one director's
Yes.
real life and everything. Um, I watched that movie and I remember seeing Zoe Kazan in that movie, and I was like, "Oh, she's great! I'd never seen her before." And then I was like on Showtime one night, and The Monster popped on, and she plays like a mom in that movie. And I was like, "Hey, I know her." So I watched the
Huh.
movie, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good, again. So it's contained, isolated horror. Woman's driving in her car with her daughter. They get attacked by something, and they're basically stuck in their car, which
Oh,
I never
that's
even
his
thought about.
movie.
This is Brian Bertino's motif. He really likes to put people in these situations. But it was pretty good. And then obviously The Dark and the Wicked. It's funny you mentioned that because I went to my local record store that I shop at pretty much every week, and the owner's daughter who works there knows I'm a horror guy because I always wear horror T-shirts and I buy stuff and like we got. So now we're like buddies. Every time I go in there, she talks about horror films, and this week she had said, "Oh, she saw this or something," and she's asked me about the new VHS Halloween. I was like, I'm not a big VHS guy. Probably not the right person to ask for that. She's like, "What are you watching?" I was like, "Well, actually, this week," I was like, it was actually on Friday, and I said, "I'm actually going to go home today and watch Vicious, this new movie that's on Paramount Plus." It's the director who did The Strangers, and he also did his other movie, The Dark and the Wicked. And she's like, "Ooh, I've seen The Strangers. What's the other one?" And I was just like, "Oh, you got to watch it." I was like, The Dark and the Wicked is literally one of the scariest, like nastiest films I've seen in the last like 5 years. Like, I don't get scared by horror, and The Dark and the Wicked freaked me out. So I was like, "You need to go see that." She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna tell my boyfriend we gotta watch it tonight." So it's funny you mentioned that because I literally just like pumped up that movie before I even watched Vicious. So I get home on Friday
But
night.
Damon, did you pump up our podcast to this woman? Does she know that
Oh,
we have a
she
podcast?
knows. Oh no, she
Okay,
knows.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just
Yeah.
triple checking because I'm in promotion mode right now.
Yeah, that's how the whole conversation eventually started. She's like, "So you're a horror person?" I was like, "Yeah, I host a horror podcast," and that's how our conversations kind of started. So, yeah, so she definitely knows I host a horror podcast. But I got home that night and I sat down. I was very excited. Closed all the windows, turned off the lights. Tried to give it as much of a theater atmosphere as I possibly could because disappointingly, this one was just straight to stream. Which, by the way, I like Paramount Plus. They've actually supported a lot of horror. They have, but
Yeah.
you know, it's just I like the theater experience. Okay, so I sit down to watch this one, and I admit my expectations were pretty high because Brian Bertino has pretty consistently delivered. Like, even though I'm just now realizing Monster was his movie, I like that movie. I love The Strangers, and clearly we both loved The Dark and the Wicked. I had a much different experience with this one, Patrick. I'm not going to sit here and say Vicious is a bad movie. I don't think it's that at all.
No.
And also want to be clear because we've talked about this in the podcast before. When you build up expectations in your head, you're like, that's not their fault, that's your fault. When you're like, I thought it was going to be this, and it wasn't that. That's not their fault, that's your fault. But in this particular instance, it wasn't that I thought it was going to be like this amazing movie. Brian Bertino just has a track record. I know it's a high comparison, but I'm talking for horror. Like, he's hit pretty much every time. And it's almost like, I know this is a very extreme example, but it's like when I go see a Scorsese film, I just know I'm going to get a good movie. Like, I just go in thinking, oh, this is going to be good. Even his lesser movies, I'm like, oh, it was still pretty good. Vicious is a self-contained horror film that basically centers around one person, this entire movie. Like, yes, there are other characters and other actors do show up, but this is primarily 90% Dakota Fanning. And she lives in a house, and she gets a knock on her door one late night, and it's an old woman standing there holding this box, and she sounds confused, almost like she's suffering from maybe dementia or something, and she's lost, and it's cold outside, and Dakota Fanning's character invites her into the house to get warm, and she's like, I can call you a ride share or call you a cab, whatever, help you out. And then that's when the woman kind of turns creepy and says, now I'm handing this responsibility, for lack of a better word, off to you. And that's the very simple premise. That's in the trailer, so clearly I'm not spoiling anything that isn't in the trailer. Yeah. It's what happens after that really is what takes place in the movie. And Patrick, I got to be honest, it just didn't hit me for me. Like, it just felt kind of messy and a little convoluted at points, and it kind of worked against itself. Like, it's almost like the rules were set up, but then it went against its own rules a lot in this movie. Like, they're like, here are the rules to survive this harrowing situation. And then, like, at every turn, it was like, well, hold on now. We're going to switch that. We're going to change this. And now you can't do this. I guess the best way I can say it was a very messy movie.
Yeah, perhaps it was messy. I will say I wish I had seen this in the theater. I did my best. I just for to give you guys some inside baseball. I was supporting my short film, The Path, at Telluride Horror Film Festival, which I realized I failed to even tell our audience. Like, maybe some of our audience goes to that festival and maybe they wanted to know. I'm sure at that point, if they saw me on the stage, they'd be like, "Oh shit, you're the guy from Rewinded Living Dead." Surprise, surprise, nobody did that. Wonderful festival though, by the way. But I was flying over on Friday, and when we normally would record, and I decided to watch it on the plane. That's not a great way to watch these kind of movies. However, something different. Now, our buddy Chuck, your movie guy, he said he watches as many movies as he can on his laptop with his headphones on, kind of shut out from the world. He goes, I swear movies are scarier that way. That's how I like to watch movies. And I go, I'm a theater guy, buddy. And 9 times out of 10, the theater beats the experience. I will say, having headphones on and being really locked into watching the movie on the plane, it jumped bigger at me than it does at home typically. I think the only other place where it would jump that big at me would be in a theater. And so, especially knowing nothing going in, and you know me, Damon, I didn't have a trailer. I knew Dakota Fanning was in it, and I knew Brian Bertino wrote and directed it. I knew zero anything else. So I go into the unknown. And that's an advantage for me. Even though my expectations are high for Brian Bertino, I don't even know what we're going to see. I didn't know an old woman was going to walk into her house. I didn't know nothing. So every turn, everything that's happening is a complete mystery to me. I haven't seen a piece of a frame of the film yet. So it's all new to me, and it's all coming in. I'm like, why is this old woman coming into this house, and what's exactly going on? And that's interesting. Okay, what's happening there? But after a while, I started to go, I think I get this, but like, is it really going to go anywhere? And it made me wonder. Brian Bertino does these two-handers so often. Strangers, Dark and the Wicked's a two-hander. I know the monster is a two-hander as well. And all of a sudden now we're in a one-hander. Like I don't want to give anything away, but the woman goes away and then Dakota Fanning has to deal with this stuff on her own. And it's essentially Dakota, as you said, 90% Dakota Fanning in this movie. Why does Brian Bertino only have the tiniest of casts? He's got a great track record. Can't we get him more people in his movie? And I don't want to spoil anything. It's going to be tough because there's so much to talk about in spoilers. So I'll just say, simply put, this movie needed more. It what it did was it put one person in front of the camera and a lot of rules around them. And there are lots of movies like that. There was that Tom Hardy movie where he's driving in a car for the entire time. I think it's called Locked or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
There's the Bill Skarsgård movie that's out with Anthony Hopkins on the cell phone or whatever the whole time. There's Phone Booth. These movies exist. All Brian Bertino needed to do was just do his standard two-hander. He's really good with those. He's not good with those. He's great with a two-hander. And I just felt like Dakota Fanning was carrying the whole damn movie herself. It was like watching a one-woman performance in a black box theater, and she was like, really trying to sell me everything. Like it was all on her to sell me everything. And there's still a lot that's very good about this movie. Like you said, it's a good movie. It's not a great movie. I liked it. I didn't love it. That's not like that's not an admonishment of this movie. It's probably top 15 for me. Maybe I got to look at the list. I'm not sure. The year is winding down. But my personal expectation was Brian Bertino's going to show everybody how it's done because I'm a big, big fan of this guy and I remain a fan of him. This movie doesn't change that at all, even though it wasn't my favorite movie of the entire year. But yeah, I was looking for something more in this movie, and I guarantee it was just like I just needed one more person, and I bet Vicious would have probably been able to achieve or get over some of the hurdles that I think it was hamstrung with just this single person horror.
I think, and we talked about this with Good Boy when I was kind of jokingly saying, like, where do we stop with point of view horror movies? Like, we got the point of view of the dog, we got the point of view of a killer. Like, what are we going to do? The point of view of the vacuum. I said that very jokingly, and actually got a couple comments, people like joking, like, we're going to do a point of view from the knife, we're going to do a point of view from, like, and I'm like, but you're right. And your point is like, we're never going to stop trying to create new things in horror because you can take a standard slasher, which has been done a million times, and you can say, hold on, I'm going to do it in the point of view of the killer this time. And you're trying to take a formula that works and add in a little wrinkle to make it a little different. And even though a movie like In a Violent Nature didn't totally work for me, I did applaud the creativity of it. And you mentioned Brian Bertino has a very specific style of, as you said, isolated, contained horror, and the vast majority of his movies are a one or a two-hander. Stranger starts out as a one-hander, becomes a two-hander, then kind of expands a little bit from there. Dark and the Wicked, technically a two-hander, but there is a mom kind of lingering around in that movie. But again, very isolated, it's on a farmhouse, very isolated, very contained horror. This movie kind of whittles everything down to one person, which is Dakota Fanning, and Dakota Fanning's fine. I'm not like a massive Dakota Fanning fan, but I'm also not like a Dakota Fanning hater. She's just kind of like there for me.
Sure.
Like, I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm just saying, like, when she's in a movie, I'm like, oh, it's Dakota Fanning, but I don't have the same reaction.
I almost want to be. It's old reliable.
Yeah, like when I see, like, for me, like, my favorite actor is Leonardo DiCaprio. When Leonardo DiCaprio is in anything, I'm like, it's Leo. I'm going to see it. It's fucking Leo. You know it's going to be good. Like, they just announced Heat 2, and they're like, Leonardo DiCaprio is probably taking over Val Kilmer's role, and I'm like, I'm in. Like, I'm in. You sold me. And there's lots of actors like that, but Dakota Fanning she's perfectly fine. I don't look at her and be like, oh man, I know she's going to bring like an A plus performance. But then you whittle it down to just her. And I think of, like, I was trying to think in my head of like other isolated horror films, like a one person or where you're trying to focus on something different. We did a film review last year for a movie called Azrael, which was Samara Weaving in a movie with no dialogue. So
Right.
different concept, but similar. Like, you're taking away everything else. Like, everything has to be visual because there's no talking, there's no dialogue. And we pretty highly complimented that film. It was a pretty unique movie, worked pretty well. The problem when you have these one, I don't know why off the top of my head, I couldn't think of anything different. I just remember my all time favorite book is a book called I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. I read that when I was a kid and I freaking loved it. And I remember when they were doing the movie with Will Smith. Now, at that point, I was just a fan. Wasn't doing horror movie reviews for our podcast, just a fan. And I remember watching that movie and I was like, yeah, this not no. I mean, they changed a lot from the book, and there were some differences
Sure.
in there, but whatever. But it was all right. It didn't totally work for me. But what did work for me was even though Will Smith's character is basically by himself, and he does have a dog for a big part of the movie, but he's by himself and he's in the movie. They have him out doing things, and there's creatures coming at him. So even though you're isolated and it's just Will Smith, you've got more going on around him. So it's not just him sitting in his house going, man, this sucks. Like, I can't go outside. There's these weird vampire creatures. This really, like, he's out doing shit and there's other things kind of coming in and coming at him. The problem when you do a movie like this with Dakota Fanning in this house, where basically it's her reacting to this weird supernatural situation that's kind of contained her in her house, is that it gets a little repetitive and it just feels a little mundane, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't hit because she has nothing to react to. Like, she's reacting to phone calls and she's reacting to she's reacting to things in the mirror, and it just doesn't have the same effect as if you actually have another actor in the room with her to react to, or at least some outside force. Someone trying to get into the house. You think about home invasion thrillers, things like that, where you're trying to lock people out. Even a movie like Hush, which is Kate Siegel being a deaf woman in a house, and there's a home invader trying to get in. You still got that tug and pull, so to speak. You still got that give and take with another actor. Dakota Fanning really had none of that in this movie, and the other people that were mostly involved, and this is not a spoiler, are like her family members. So it's not like she's trying to kill her family members. Like, she's just
Right.
talking and interacting with them. So there's no like outside force. And it just kind of got repetitive, and I just didn't feel like a connection. It felt like it was just like her acting against a wall. And that's a tough situation to put an actor into because you just don't get anything from a wall.
I know what you're saying. I want to address it, but it's very spoilery. So I don't want to get into it now, but I do want to address that because I can't remember if I said this or not. I'm on 3 hours sleep. You got to forgive me. But I did see it a second time. I saw it on the way back to my next destination because your boy's on tour right now. So I actually watched it a second time before the podcast, and I had very similar feelings in my initial watch that you do, but my reaction to it is spoilery, but it's different and it's addressing that specifically because I did feel like in the initial watch I was like, oh, like she's really just acting by herself in the room. She needs an entity or something to work against, and she doesn't have it. I saw it a little bit differently on the second watch, but we'll get into that in the spoilers. I do want to do a couple of things here, Damon. One, I want to ask you about comps, like comparable movies, so that way our fans have an idea of what they're getting into. But I do want to say this before we get into comps. I do want to say this is my favorite Dakota Fanning movie. And that's not to dog on Dakota Fanning. I'm just in the same boat you are. I'm like, oh, it's Dakota Fanning. Okay. Like it nothing bad or good, just right down the middle. We reviewed Watchers or The Watchers last year, I believe it was,
Yep, last year.
and we were way not into it. And that wasn't Dakota Fanning's fault. It was just a very big, very similar, actually, kind of a messy movie in general. And but she had a lot of people to play with. She actually had a playground of people to work off of. This movie does not have that. I like this movie. I like Vicious much better than The Watchers. If that gives our fans any indication of how I feel about this movie. If you liked The Watchers, I think you might like this, or no, I'm sorry, if you didn't like The Watchers, I think you might like this much better. Do you have any comparable movies that people can go, oh, it's kind of like this thing? Because I have like one or two in mind.
That's a good question. I really didn't think about that before we talk. I do want to mention though, like when you say Dakota Fanning, I just looked at her filmography. I'm like, what else? Because I know her. She's like one of those actors. I'm like, oh yeah, Dakota Fanning. I would say my favorite Dakota Fanning performances have been Man on Fire, which I loved. Denzel
That's
Washington. That's a
great.
great movie.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And her, I know it's not your favorite subject, but it's my guy. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, when she plays the weird, creepy Manson family member in that movie.
He's in that movie?
She is okay.
I'm not
so
even joking.
no,
I've seen that
okay,
movie
so
multiple times. She's in it?
here's the crazy thing about this. So I've seen obviously Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is my favorite movie of all time now. It's my favorite Tarantino movie. It's become my favorite Tarantino movie, and I love that movie. When I saw it in the theater, I was like, it was all right. And then it's one of those movies I had to rewatch like 10 times to really fall in love with it. Sydney Sweeney's in that movie. It took me
That I remember.
like 4 times seeing it to recognize her because they got her so like drummed down and like dirty and gross. My girl Danielle Harris, who I've said on this podcast has been like my lifetime crush. Like I've had a crush on her since I was a kid and just growing
Love
up.
you, Queen.
All-time crush on Danielle Harris. She's in that movie. I didn't even realize it till months later. She's the pregnant woman who warns Tex that someone's shown up when Brad Pitt's character shows up.
Shit.
And I was like, oh, she's in that. So Dakota Fanning is the girl Squeaky who shows up at the door when Brad Pitt goes and knocks on the door to go see the guy who's in the house, and he knocks on the door and she's like, well, he's sleeping. George is sleeping.
That's right. She's Bruce Dern's like girlfriend or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Squeaky.
That's right.
She goes, you might have to shake him awake. I just fucked his brains out. That's Dakota Fanning. And she's really creepy. She does a good job of that role. And I know she's in it for like 10 minutes, but she's good. I was like, that's.
You know what? Fair play, Damon, because she disappeared into the role. I know the scene you're talking about because I was like, when is she in this movie? Like, I know, I like that movie. Yeah, you might have to wake him up. I fucked his brains out. I remember that. So fair enough. Yeah, that's probably, it's a little cameo basically in the movie. It's not a big role.
And she's also I just rewatched War of the Worlds the other night, and I still like that movie, the Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise one. And she's in that too, and a child actor. But there are Dakota Fanning performances I like, but I would agree in terms of like a starring performance, this is probably yeah. As far as your like comparison, man, you got to give me a couple examples. And now, like, I Am Legend is the one I thought of like this isolated one person.
That's a big movie, though. That's a big action movie.
And it's not a great movie, in my opinion. It's not a very good movie, in my opinion.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at here is that the comp that immediately came to mind was also not that good of a movie. And it was The Box with Cameron Diaz. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, I remember that movie. Yeah.
It feels very similar in premise, although I actually think Brian Bertino does it better. Like, here's praise of the movie. I do think he did this premise a little bit better than that. My comparison was The Box because I thought like, oh, it's kind of like that. Like someone comes to your home and then, unbeknownst to you, things that are going to happen are going to be terrible for you. But I think this movie's much better than The Box, but that's kind of what you're getting into.
And you mentioned, actually, I just threw this out there like a movie where things happen. And I'm not saying this is my favorite movie, but it's a movie where shit happens. Castaway.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Cruise by himself. But things happen to or Tom Hanks. Tom Cruise. Tom Hanks. Things continuously happen to him.
Yeah.
And
that's
outside forces. and that's what I'm getting at. Like that was my problem with this movie. Is like it's not a bad movie. It sounds like I'm complaining a lot about this movie. It's not a bad movie. It felt so contained that it just felt like Dakota Fanning and her character were just acting against themselves, and there just wasn't enough outside forces to drive the story as well as, like, let's say a Castaway, where like things continuously happen to push Tom Hanks forward into the eventual conclusion of the film when he escapes the island. This movie just, to me, was missing that element, whether it was a here's another one, the Djinn. One of two of our favorite directors.
Oh God, the Djinn's great though. Sorry, the Djinn's way better than this.
Yeah, but you get the little boy in an apartment, which we always compliment those guys. Our one or two of they did the boy behind the door. Their new movie Push is fantastic. David Charbonnet, and Justin Powell.
There's another isolated single person in a house. Yeah.
But the Djinn was in an apartment. We always compliment that movie. We're like, and we've interviewed those guys on the show a couple different times, and we're just like, how do you do it, man? You put them in an apartment and you made it scary because an apartment's like maybe 3 rooms total. You got a living room, a kitchen, which is open, a bedroom, and a bathroom. Like, how do you make that a self contained horror, make it scary? And then the djinn is like this mythical creature. That movie is scary as fuck and it works really, really well.
Yeah.
But you still have that outside entity hunting. And by the way, that boy in the movie is also a mute. Let's not forget. So you didn't get dialogue
Right.
with the kid. That worked because you had that outside entity hunting the boy, for lack of a better word, haunting the boy. There's not really that in this movie. And I think that kind of took away from that one person performance. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just thought of the djinn. I want to mention that. So.
No, that's good. Honestly, you did exactly what this experiment was all about. I wanted to find the movies where it's like, oh, it's kind of like this or it's kind of like that. And we actually came up with a lot of different comparisons there. How much more do we do pre-spoilers here, Damon? I feel like it's time to get into it.
Yeah, it is. I want to say Vicious is available on Paramount Plus, and they have a lot of horror movies over there. Actually, Paramount Plus is also Showtime, so you get a lot of stuff over there. So check it out. And even though I'm saying like there's issues I have with this movie, it's still worth a watch. Like I'm not, and I'll tell you that even for the worst. I mean, the only movie I'll tell you not to watch is Halloween Ends because that's the worst movie ever made. But otherwise, we always tell you like judge for yourselves. And
Yeah.
but I'm not even going that route. I'm not going like the cupcake route. Like, oh, judge for yourself. No, this isn't bad. It's just not. It's not as good as I hoped it would be, and not as good as I thought it would be. And there's a lot of issues I have, but we'll get into that with spoilers. So, Paramount Plus, Vicious, Brian Bertino, available right now. Check it out. And also, if you want early access to episodes, this one's not coming too early because we had to record a little late because Patrick was on the road, which happens from time to time. But normally we record, like we're going to be recording The Black Phone as our next episode. I'll give you a little spoiler for that. And that is going to drop days before we drop it on the regular podcast. So patreon.com/Rewind the Living Dead. Sign up. It's cheap. Doesn't cost you very much. You get early access to episodes. You also get bonus episodes. We were doing Alien Earth recaps. We just did a review of The Smashing Machine. We did Superman. So non-horror movies as well. And you get to vote on which ones of those we review. So check that out. We're going to do some sort of Oscar podcast this year, I'm sure, because you and I are Oscar whores. So
Wait for award season. I'm so excited.
so we're going to be doing that. So patreon.com/Rewind the Living Dead. With that being said, Patrick, we are now going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen Vicious, be forewarned. I turn it over to you, sir. What should we say? Do you want to talk about the? Let me turn it over to you for the plot first, just so we could really unravel what this plot is.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it is covered in the trailer actually, which is Dakota Fanning is this girl, and they do Brian does a great job first of setting up who Polly is, and Polly is a bit of a ne'er do well. She's living probably with cheap rent in this big old house that her sister rents out to her, and she's kind of hops job to job. She's not keeping the house up very well. She's got a lot of dead plants around. There's people on her voicemail saying, "Hey, are you going to show up to this thing or are you just going to flake?" She's kind of just one of these people who's just getting by. And it's, by the way, weighing on her. You can feel it in her performance because Dakota Fanning is a good actor. I want to be clear about that. And then the knock at the door comes. And it's this old woman, and they call her the woman. It's Catherine Hunter, who's a great character actor that you probably recognize. And she just kind of pleads her way to come into the house. And you already know you're a horror aficionado yourself because you listen to one of the best horror podcasts on the planet. You know, when you let the woman in, problems are going to come up. And at one point, she opens up this little box and she says, "It's yours now, and you're probably going to die tonight." And you're like, "What the fuck? Okay, is this a witch? What the hell am I dealing with?" And then Polly just goes, "Get the fuck out." She pulls a game. Damon Martin goes, "Get the fuck out of my house. Take your box with you. Okay, go off into the dark night. I don't care that it's snowing and cold out there, lady. You don't come into my house with a box and tell me I'm going to die tonight. Goodbye." She did the Damon Martin end of movie, right? Wrong. She goes back into that house and the box is there. And now she's like, "What the fuck?" She calls her mom and she's like, "This is weird." Or, I'm kind of mixing that up a little bit I don't want to belabor the plot too much and tell you all A, B, C. But basically, she's on the phone with her mom going, "This really weird shit just happened. And now there's a box in my house." And then classic Brian Bertino. Mom all of a sudden is like, "Bitch, I ain't your mom. I'm not, that ain't your mom you're talking to. You got problems now. And here's the rules. You're going to put something in there you hate, something in there you need, and something in there you love, or you're dying tonight. And you got a little, she's got a little, literally a ticking clock, Damon, a little, what do they call it?
Hour.
Hourglass.
Yeah.
And that hourglass starts running like magically by itself. So now, guess what? The clock's ticking. You know, Brian Bertino, ever the efficient storyteller, goes, yeah, we literally are going to put a ticking clock in this movie, so she's got to act right away. And she kind of runs through these series of tests. And first, she tries to do it the way we met Polly, like half-asses it. She just goes, "I'll put my cigarettes in there because I shouldn't be smoking." Phone rings. Hey, it's Dad, honey. That's some fucking bullshit. That's not something you hate. That's something you think you're supposed to hate. And guess what? Dad's been dead for a while. So that's not a phone call you want to take. And long story short, she kind of goes through a very emotional, I would call it a very emotional journey with herself and her experiences to fill that box with things she hates, things she needs, and things she loves. Now, you said, Damon, that she's not playing off of anybody, and that's exactly how I felt the first time I watched this. But the truth is, and we'll start with Dad because that was a good one, she does play off of people. It's just how she plays off them that, in my opinion, didn't really land the way I wanted it to. Um, Dad says, "Hey, it's not cigarettes, so you need to think harder or you're gonna die." I don't know why this demon is helping her. That's the weird. That part struck me as strange, and it looks like you probably had that in your head. The
Can
demon is
I,
helping her by, yeah. Go ahead.
I I think here's my biggest problem with the movie, honestly. Something you love, something you hate, something you need. The entity, whatever you want to call it, literally tells her what to do. Like, she does the
Yeah.
pack of cigarettes, and then the first thing she does is something she hates, and she figures out, literally, it leads her to her closet where she finds possessions of when her dad died of cancer, and she finds the cross he used to wear around his neck, and so she hates religion, so she puts the cross. It literally leads her to it. And she's like, oh
I
yeah, the
know.
cross. And she puts it in the box. And then there's this weird thing where like this video pops on TV and it shows her niece cutting off her own toe. And she's like, oh, that's something I love. So she literally cuts off her own toe and then she ends up
Something I
cutting off
need.
her,
Yeah.
yeah, cutting off her own fingers. And I'm like, okay, if the point of this is like a test for you, your test of will to like give up something you love, something you hate, and something you need, how is it actually an entity if it's literally fucking telling her what she needs to cut off, what she needs to sacrifice? It's literally everything. Every single move she makes, the entity's like, hold on. It's almost like the hot and cold game. It's like, no, you're cold. You're cold. No, cut off that finger. Yes, there you go. Cut off that finger. That's how elementary it gets at this point. I'm like, isn't that like, wouldn't it be? I'm not trying to rewrite the movie. I'm not trying to tell Brian Bertino how to do his job. He's clearly a better filmmaker than I could ever be. But like, wouldn't it be a little more harrowing if she's like, well, fuck, I need my finger. She cuts it off and then nothing happens. He's like, well, fuck me, I need to cut my hand off or whatever. Escalate it, make it scary that way. They're literally telling her what she needs to do. That to me kind of takes away the whole horror of it all. At least
Sorry,
in my
Damon.
opinion.
No, sorry for the pause. I was literally writing the answer to why, so I don't forget it. But to me, the answer to why has to go with the ending. So I don't know if we want to jump to the ending right away and talk about it. We can, and then we can get into categories if you want. It's a very simple, very contained movie. We don't need to belabor it. Essentially, she is going to keep going through these things, and so the to finish that thought, she does actually play off of people. She plays off first. There's this like entity in the house that is like the mother, like hovering over her, and then it just evaporates. I mean, she's just gone, and I was like, why? She was scary, and that was, I believe it was Mary McCormick
It
in this
was.
like almost like satanic, like weird, like demonic thing, and I was like, cool, we're getting into some Dark and the Wicked shit. That's how it felt. And then when for instance, the dad test, all of a sudden now dad's like kind of a ghoul and he's in like a hospital smock, and then he kind of comes and goes and he just evaporates. And I think the problem with that, and that happens a couple more times in the movie, but I think the problem with it was that it never stuck around long enough to feel like a threat threat, like something that she needed to battle back against. And this, to his credit, is I think what he was after is she's not really battling these exterior forces. This test is about battling yourself very specifically. And I thought Brian Bertino does a great job of thematically getting into the idea of self-loathing. Now, you mentioned anxiety, and if you didn't listen to our intro, Brian Bertino talks about the idea of how anxiety can fuel a lot of fear and a lot of like problems in your life, and it can actually wreck you. That's how Brian Bertino saw it. I saw it, and Damon, not to get too personal, I saw it as somebody suffering from depression and self-loathing. Right before we started this podcast, actually, I think myself personally, I was like on the brink. I was in a bad place. I had just been bad to myself, if that makes any sense. I was just very negative about who I was and where I was in life. And it was making me sick, like mentally sick and physically sick. It manifested itself in really tough ways. And so I saw a little bit of me in Polly in that respect. She's, when we meet her before any of this stuff is going on, when we meet her, she just is fucking miserable. She's miserable about who she is. And so it's one of those things where I was like, oh, I get that. I get that. And this whole game is sort of a test as a test for that. It's like, how do we push you with your weaknesses? What I appreciate about that is that he did not fall back on the very standard theme of the day, trauma. He didn't stand on trauma. He stood on, for him, anxiety, and for me, self-loathing. I really saw self-loathing in there, and I was like, okay, yeah, like I see what you're doing. The problem is it ultimately to me did not resonate the way I thought it was going to, because of what we said earlier. I think is that she really needed to be playing off of someone. I think, and please tell me what you think, I think she needed a central demon to play off of that could change into her dad, that could change into her mom or her sister or her nephew or her niece. And I'm willing to bet Brian Bertino goes, I'm sorry, yes, that's exactly what the demon was doing. I needed more of the demon. The family play wasn't working for me, just personally. And I think it seemed like it didn't work for you either.
Yeah, and I'm going back to our comparison of this movie with the Djinn. Like, I think that's what made the Djinn so scary. The Djinn was always there, and it would transform into different entities and show itself as different people and haunting and creeping out this little boy. It was basically hunting in this house. And I think that's kind of what this movie was missing. And I read an interview with Brian Bertino after seeing this, and it was a spoiler interview, and he was talking about the theme of the movie. Now, you know my opinion, Patrick, two things about movies that way. One, what a movie means to you doesn't necessarily mean what it means to me. That's one of the reasons why, like, I try not to get too deep into like the existential meaning of movies, because I feel like I listen to a lot of podcasts on film, and I get a lot of like, this is what it meant. And maybe it did. Maybe that's exactly what the filmmaker was going for. But a lot of times the way I take it is like, well, I liked it for this reason. And you're just telling me I'm wrong because you liked it a different way. So I try not to get too deep into like, well, this was really a movie about the existential crisis of humanity or whatever. But Brian Bertino did say something interesting, and when I thought about it, I was like, you know what? That, and to his credit, it did raise my opinion of this movie a little bit. He was talking about how a big part of him writing this script was when he started having panic attacks a couple years ago. And I've been on the brink of a panic attack before, but I've never gone on a full-blown panic attack, but I do know friends who have, and anxiety, and they need to take, medication for that. And I have a friend who deals with panic attacks, and he told me at one point, he's like, if you want to know what a panic attack feels like, it's you're dying. You're literally dying. You can't catch your breath. It's like falling, and the ground is underneath, nothing is underneath you. You're dying. Literally, it feels like you're dying and nothing can save you. That's what a panic attack feels like. And I was like, fuck, that sounds fucking dreadful. And he's like, it is. And he's like, and I was like, how do you get out? And he's like, well, some people can pull themselves naturally. He's like, I take a fucking dose of Klonopin and it pulls me out. Yeah. He's like, I have to take a dose of Klonopin and pull me out. And he's like, and he gets like anticipatory dread. Like if he goes out in public, like he has to have his pills with him, or he'll oh shit, I don't have my pill. It's like a person with a who has an inhaler, and you have like you start breathing heavy, you're like, oh shit, I have asthma. I don't have my inhaler. It gets 1,000 times worse because you think, oh shit, I don't have my inhaler.
Yeah.
And what Brian Bertino said is he's like, this was an examination in anxiety and how we allow anxiety to rule our lives. And he said that while the haunting entity is going after Polly in this movie, and locks her in her house at one point, and obviously has this weird, creepy mom figure, her dad's calling her who's dead, threats against her family, all these things. But ultimately, a lot of this movie takes place in like hallucinations. Like what Polly is seeing is not reality. She calls her mom. It's not actually her mom. She gets a call from her dad. Her dad's dead. She gets a call from her sister, who is the sister who rents her house, who lives now across town with her husband and her kid. It's not really her sister. So a lot of this is like these hallucination, fever dreams, for lack of a better word. And he said the real beauty of this movie is that it's anxiety. Like she has anxiety that something bad's going to happen to her niece, something bad's going to happen to her sister, something bad's going to happen to her mom. And the reality is, if you watch it closely, it's like nothing really happens to them. It's Polly allowing the anxiety of that overtaking her. And so she's convinced that something's bad's going to happen to her family, and things like this. And he's like, that really was the overarching theme of the movie, is how we allow anxiety to rule our lives. When we think something bad's going to happen, it's going to happen, and we just allow it to like absorb into us, and it ruins us. Like anxiety can literally ruin your life. And I was like, yeah, I get that. That's a pretty beautiful way of looking at this. And when I looked at the movie through that lens, I was like, it worked better for me. Now, my opinion on this, Patrick, when you have to explain it to me in that regard to make it better, that's probably not a good thing. It's not that I didn't get it. I got the anxiety of it all, but just not to that full extent of like, that's the entire purpose of the movie. I didn't quite get that. But when he said that, I was like, yeah, I see it. I still didn't love the execution of it. I still thought it was a messier film. And as you said, like, I would have liked, as you mentioned, like the entity, like staying in the house with her, constantly there. It can switch forms. It can change who it is, whatever. But that 2 seconds, like when her mom pops up, she's this weird, like ashy covered, creepy, like witch looking thing. And it's just gone. And the dad's on the phone. And it's like, just leave something in the house with her. I think it would have worked better. But I do appreciate the examination of how we allow anxiety to overtake our lives, because that was when I thought about it, I was like, that is pretty relevant in this movie, and that really does serve a purpose, because we're all guilty of that at some point. I'm guilty of that. Like a very, 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 very minor example. A couple of months ago, I drove to get food from a restaurant, and it was pouring rain, and I drove into the parking lot, and my car dipped and hit a ditch. And when I came out and when I was driving away, I heard a scraping sound. Something was falling off my car, and it was scraping. For the next like 24 hours until I took it to the mechanic, I was like, fuck, I probably just ripped off my muffler. I ripped off something that's going to cost me so much money. I literally just paid off my car recently, and I was like, here we go, pay off my car. And I got a fucking $2,000 car bill coming because it was bad. It was scraped. Took it to the mechanic 24 hours later. It was the little pan they put under to protect your car from hitting that. They bolted it back up again. It cost me like $70. But for 24 hours, I allowed the worst machinations inside myself to say, oh, fuck, this is the worst case scenario. I'm going to have to pay $2,000. I'd put on a credit card. I'm going to have to fucking go without my car for it. Like, I just allowed the anxiety of something being wrong with my car to just weigh on me. I didn't sleep well that night. It's such a dumb thing, but we're all guilty of that. And that happened to me literally a couple months ago. And I thought about it with this movie because I took it to the mechanic. They called me back. I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go. And he's like, yeah, we just had to screw the pan back up. It was $70. Literally lost a night of sleep because I was like, oh, fuck, it's going to be the worst. We're all guilty of that. So when I thought about it in that context, the movie worked better for me.
Yeah, and I think all it was really missing was like someone for Polly to play off of, not even just because I still think like Brian Bertino did do the thing where he's like, yeah, the entity takes shape in all these different ways, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but on that side, I just think the scares were a little too basic, and that's why I think it ultimately didn't work. Like, what's coming if you're horror savvy, but even for Polly to just play off of a human being in the room her mom in the room, her sister in the room, and then one point she does play off her sister in the room, but it's so brief. I mean, it's just poof. The off chance she actually plays in front of a human, it ends almost immediately, and it's almost like she just needed someone to grow with. But all that said, like everything you just said about anxiety, and what I was talking about with depression, like that's how I picked up on it. I picked up, and by the way, my depression created anxiety. It really did. And then I was having anxiety attacks, which I'd never had in my life. All of it's there. You can feel it. It's under the surface. Like it's still there. That's the big positive I have about this movie is that thematically, we didn't do trauma this time. It was so easy. He was just like, I want to do anxiety. We've examined trauma enough. We did it in Dark and the Wicked. Like I don't need to go down that road again. Just what
And
what does it feel like?
and even though there's a dead dad, they didn't play on that too much, which I appreciated. Sorry, I just had to throw it out there
Yeah.
because there was a dead parent, but they didn't go down that road.
He does a lot of things right, actually. It's just I think ultimately the scares weren't there. They just weren't. They just weren't. But the theme was more original than your average movie. That's why I'm like, you should check out Vicious. That yes, I'm biased for Brian Bertino, but in all reality, he confirmed it. You confirmed it with your own feelings here. It wasn't the same old song and dance that you're getting from these types of dramatic horror films where it's like at the end of the day it's just because if the whole movie was about her losing her dad to cancer, you'd be like, geez, we've seen this a million times. It was just a piece, and really it was about her whole life and what brought her to being like this 32-year-old woman who was just kind of who was frozen in her own like self-hatred and had to beat it. Um, you want to talk about the ending real quick, Damon?
Yeah, let's talk about the ending. With this, I'll hand it to you first. But yeah, this ending is interesting. I want to see how you interpret it because once again I did read that interview with Brian Bertino, and he kind of explained the ending. But I want you to. I
Oh,
hand it to you.
interesting.
I want to hand it to you.
What I saw with this movie, and she really does go back and forth, and she's kind of battling through, and eventually she believes she's given what the box wants. She's like, I've done it, I've done it. But yet the box is relentless for some reason. And no matter what she puts in that box now, it eats it and then it asks for something more. And she's like, fuck. And so she's like, I'll just have to pass it on to someone else. And now all of a sudden, she's like our woman from the beginning. She's knocking on a door, and this young woman, Tara, answers, and she's like, can I come in? She's basically doing what the woman did to her, knowing that's what it needs to do. And then all of a sudden she sits down, she realizes that she knows the girl's name. She says, your name is Tara. Don't ask me how I know that, but you're going to do this now. Sorry, gotta go. Like I'm dropping this on your doorstep. I think that's the only way out of this. And then she goes outside, or I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but just for the sake of brevity here. And that phone rings again. And that phone's been ringing because the phone's been telling her what to do this entire time. And she doesn't answer it. And this goes back to our issue with why the fuck is this entity telling her what to put in the box? It drove me nuts. I think, in my opinion, the answer is you can't beat this game if you keep playing it. Anxiety, depression, self-loathing, hatred, self-hatred. If you keep playing that game, you will lose. You will die. So what does she do, Damon? She drops the phone and she goes, I'm not playing your fucking game no more. That's how I interpreted the end of this movie. Please tell me that's exactly how Brian Bertino saw it, and then I can call myself a Bertino faithful at this point.
So while I didn't pick up on everything during the movie when it came to the anxiety, I did get the ending of she handed off the box and basically passed on the curse, for lack of a better word, to this other girl, and that's how she beats it. But then we find out she doesn't beat it. The phone rings and she's right back in. And I assume he actually never addressed this, but I assume the title of Vicious is really a vicious circle because it just keeps coming back around at you. That's the way I took it. And the ending, when she finally ignores that call and she goes over to her sister's house, she reunites with her niece, and she kind of like gets almost like an air, like a brevity, like almost an air of lifted off her, like a weight lifted off her, and she's just like, "Fuck this phone, this whole entire thing. I'm letting it go, and I'm moving on. I'm going to ignore your call. I'm going to ignore your anxiety." That's how I took it as well. And Brian Bertino confirmed it. He said the only way you beat this is by learning that you don't have to give it strength. You don't have to give it you don't have to give it what it wants. Once you stop feeding what it wants, it goes away. And he said that's the only way you beat this thing. And so passing it on, the same thing happens because when she goes back to Tara the next day, she says, I made a huge mistake. Give me the box back. I don't want to put this on you. And she's like, I don't even know who you are. And in Polly's mind, she's thinking it's another hallucination. Like this thing's been running these really wild hallucinations by her all night, like where she went to her sister's house and her niece gets like transformed into a weird creature and she literally stabs Polly and it's all a hallucination. So when she goes to Tara's house, knocks on the door, Tara answers, she's like, we just got home today, my family, like I have no idea who you are. She's like, okay, so I guess this was all a hallucination. Close the door. Tara walks inside. There's blood all over the walls. She lies. Don't listen to her. And she's killed her parents. This is what the box has driven Tara to do. So it started. That vicious circle is going on. But the only way to beat it, as Brian Bertino confirmed, is to ignore it, to learn to move on without allowing the anxiety, the panic attack to wash over you and let it overtake your life. Just like I was talking about with that anticipatory dread of being out somewhere and not having a pill to control your panic attack. You lock yourself into that mode of like, I'm going to die. When in reality, you're not. But you allow your head to take you there. And he said that's the only way you beat it. And I was like, okay, I did get that. I didn't get everything else totally, but I did get that. And I was like, when she ignores the call and nothing happens, that's the entire point, is like you give it power by listening to it, by reacting to it, by doing what it's telling you. And once you're just like, no, fuck off, that's it, because it has no power over you anymore.
Yeah, and I'll say one last thing, and we'll get to categories here. Just because it's something I learned on my journey to kind of crawling out of the depths of depression is you got to, if you have negative thoughts running in your mind, and it could be about yourself, it could be about other people, I recommend that you talk to those thoughts and tell them to fuck off, genuinely. And that's what I had to do. That's actually where my journey started in recovering from all of that, was just going like, stop. None of that was happening. That whole negative conversation was happening in your head. If that sounds familiar to you as a listener and going, yeah, I did have this super negative conversation with my significant other in my head. It never existed. Stop feeding into those. Stop having those fake arguments in your head. Stop having those fake bad thoughts about yourself in your head. Put them away. Stop talking to them, or straight up tell them to fuck off. And that's exactly what this movie's about. That's why I'm saying I really like this movie for those things. The horror elements of this movie don't ring, but that element, that thematic element, is strong. It's classic Bertino. Here we go. Like he understood that part of it and executed that part of it very well. The horror was lacking. The theme was not. To me, the theme was very strong.
And last thing I'll say, and I don't want to turn this into a PSA, but I want to say this is a person who really advocates for mental health. I think the other theme in this movie that worked really well for me was when Polly finally beat the entity, when she defeated the entity and got away from it. It's when she shows up at her sister's house and her niece comes out and embraces her and she connects with another person. And then when the phone calls, she's just like, fuck this phone call. I'm not answering that. I'm moving on with my life. Not everyone's going to have this, and I get it, but don't be afraid to talk to somebody about what you're going through. I think I'm the worst at self-containing my feelings. Like when I'm pissed off or upset or depressed or whatever, I have a tendency to just self-absorb it into myself. Do not be afraid to talk to somebody, whether that's your father, your mother, your psychiatrist, if it's your priest, whatever it is. Your best friend, your girlfriend, whatever. Do not be afraid to express yourself to somebody, to even if it's just getting the emotions out and telling them how you feel, because that was a big theme I took away from the end of the movie, because every conversation that Polly has early in the movie, even before the woman shows up, it feels like she's being talked to and not really listening. Like her mom's like, you need to get ready. She was going to go back to school. It's kind of like at the beginning of the movie, she's going to take a test to get back into college. She's like 32, but she's like, yeah, I know, mom. I know, mom. Like she's just like the very like, I know, mom. Like not really listening or responding. And by the end of the movie, she's so happy to see her family and connect with them, she finally was able to get out of that self-isolated horror. And I'm not saying you have to have like the giant circle of people around you, but like do not be afraid to talk to somebody about what you're feeling, because even expressing it out loud makes a huge difference. There's my 3 years of psychology I took in college. Didn't get my degree, but there's my 3 years of psychology I'm expressing to the people listening to this podcast.
Very, very well said, Damon. Please heed the words of your favorite podcast and take care of your mental health. We care about you out there. We genuinely do.
Absolutely. So, Patrick, let's get into some categories. Let's kick things off as we do each and every week on the show. And it's so funny. Okay. So, we were kind of running late. Patrick, as you mentioned, is on the road. You're on the road right now. You're doing this podcast, even though you probably shouldn't be, because you're on the road. You're traveling. You're doing work. You're doing film festivals. So, we greatly appreciate you always being here to do the podcast with us. I just now looked at categories because you sent them over as we started the show, and we always like to try to get things fresh. I was so convinced your best performance was going to be different from mine. I was like, sweet, I'm going to have a different. We have the same best performance. So, Patrick, I turn it to you. Apparently, we share one brain like Jay and Silent Bob. What is your best performance for Vicious?
My best performance goes to Catherine Hunter, who plays the woman, because it really, like, I was kind of gonna go to Dakota Fanning, because I was like, well, she does have to carry the movie, but truth be told, I think that was the problem with the movie, not her acting. It's just like this problem of the structure of the movie, and so it wasn't really landing with me that she was the star of the movie, and then so I'm like, I don't know, it's not best performance isn't feeling like Dakota Fanning. On the second watch, I was like, it's Catherine Hunter. She comes in. She's got this presence to her. I don't remember her name. The small woman from Poltergeist. What was her name? Do you remember?
Oh, oh my God, I cannot remember her name.
Anyway, I don't want to belabor that. My point is that when she comes in and she's like, "This house is clear," like, like there's just something about her that just draws you in. That's Catherine Hunter in this movie. And by the way, she comes back later in the movie. When we think all is said and done, she shows back up in Polly's house and is like, the box wants more, because as we mentioned, the box wants more. And so Catherine Hunter has a full-blown fucking fight with a woman who is about 50 years her junior. And it goes way better than like Pamela Voorhees in the original Friday the 13th. Like they have a full-on brawl and she's covered in like blood and guts and gore. And I was like, you know what? Catherine Hunter's working her ass off in this movie. So she gets my props for best performance.
The character in Poltergeist was Tangina Barons was the character's name. It was played by Zelda Rubinstein. I know you're talking about
Zelda Rubinstein. Yeah, we miss you, Zelda. Thanks for all your good times.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you mentioned like, and this isn't, like you said, it's not a knock on Dakota Fanning's performance. I just assumed you would go with her only because she's the main person in this movie. But Catherine Hunter does a really good job. And you know what I relate it to? And I go back to what is probably, I mean, I don't want to compare, say, The Strangers or Dark and the Wicked's better, but Dark and the Wicked is more recent and it scared the fuck out of me. We always, to this day, you and I quote this movie when we talk just randomly. I'll be like, come outside. And it was the priest character in that movie, played by Xander Berkeley. Great character actor. And he's a very small, minor, very secondary role in Dark and the Wicked, but he's so fucking creepy in that movie. And that scene in particular when it's like, come outside. And it's so fucking creepy. That's what her performance reminded me of. She's not in the movie very long. She's maybe in it 15 minutes in total, like for both, beginning and end. But she does that. She has that voice, and she's like, "Well, I'm gonna start." She's like,
"It's just good."
It's just, it reminded me of Xander Berkeley and Dark and the Wicked. And I was like, "Fuck, she's good." Like she was really good in this. Like she set the tone for this movie.
Yeah, no, she really did. I'm glad we both had the same performance because it was worthy of highlighting.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next category and let's talk about best kill / best gore. There is some gore in this movie. There actually is some gore in this movie, and there are kind of kills, I guess. It's a lot of hallucinations and things like that. But Patrick, what is your best kill / best gore in the Dark and the Wicked in Vicious?
My best kill and gore in Vicious actually was just some gore, and it was Holy alley face is what I called it. So at one point, Polly runs to their house because now her sister's getting fake phone calls that she's coming over, and she's very, very worried that this entity is going to harm her family. So she rushes over there, only to find everybody in bed lifeless. And then she thinks she does something right by getting a lock of Allie's hair, putting it in the box, and feeding it to this thing, and the box doesn't like that. And so but we don't know that at first. What we see is Allie wake up and she go, "Oh, thank God, Allie's awake. She's okay." She's so worried. It's a cute little girl, whatever, 7-year-old girl, something like that. And then she's holding Allie, and then all of a sudden these holes start to form on her face. And I don't know if I'm saying it right. It's like tryptanophobia or something, or
I think it's trichtophobia. I think is what it's called.
Trichtophobia, yeah. It
Yeah.
it really triggers trichtophobia, which in my opinion is an anxiety issue. It's some, and so I was like, oh, it makes sense that she's decaying in this disgusting way. And really, and it's just like you don't want to see this beautiful little girl like start to, form holes all over her face. It's disgusting. And so for me, I thought it was very effective in that moment.
So I don't want to skip ahead in our categories, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of combine because I want to play off of that. Our next category is best scare, and that was my best scare. That I don't have that anxiety necessarily about the trichophobia, but that got me, and I know why it got me because it's well documented on this show. I work in the mixed martial arts industry as a day job, and a very common affliction in mixed martial arts is fighters get what's called a staph infection, which is a
Yes.
bacteria that literally eats your flesh. And there are photos and videos, and it's really gross. Like it literally just eats a hole in your body. And I remember the great Kevin Randleman, who was a great fighter back in the day. Sadly, he's gone. He had gotten stricken with a really, really bad case of staph infection. And he texted me photos of his staph infection. It was literally holes just dug out
Yeah.
of his skin. And it freaked me the fuck out. Like it was so gross and so nasty. And like
I remember those photos.
yeah, it freaked me out so bad. And so that scene got me. And I'm not like that. That's normally not like a thing. I don't have that
Yeah.
necessarily, that phobia. But man, when that little girl, those holes started digging into her face and she's got like these, it looked like, reverse chicken pox, like literally just driven into her face. It was just really gross. And that freaked me out for the little girl. I was like, God damn, that scared me just to watching the holes form. It was just really creepy. So that was actually my best scare. But my best gore, and I'll be honest, it didn't totally freak me out, but it got my girlfriend. My girlfriend was watching this with me, and there's a moment where Polly, to satisfy the boss, she cuts off her toe. Now, she ends up cutting off her finger as well. When she cuts off her toe, they really get in deep with a pair of like garden shears, and she's just digging in, man, and she's screaming and squealing and twitching, and she cuts off her pinky toe, and it's pretty fucking gruesome. Now, like I said, it didn't totally get me, although because I've seen that before, but I was like, oh, that's pretty good. My girlfriend's like, I can't watch this. I can't watch. She like turned her face away, and I was like, it worked because she was just like free. The hand thing didn't get her as much as the toe thing got her though. So I was like, I got to mention the toe. So that's my best gore / best scare. So I'll hand it back to you for best scare.
Damon, I do want to talk about that toe finger thing for a second because I put in my notes, Brian Bertino sure hates digits. Like he's got to see those digits come off. And I was sitting on the airplane, for the rare instance where I had a middle seat and I was playing that scene, and both people on the sides of me they had no desire to see what was happening on my screen, and they could not unsee what was happening. They were very upset by that scene. My best scare is really just kind of the whole scene of her going to her sister's house because she walks in and her family is dead. Damon, it's not scary. I didn't jump. It's the anxiety, the fear that you were going to walk in on your dead family. That is what got me about that scene because she sees her sister dead and she sees Allie dead. These are people she loves. She doesn't want to see them dead, and she's seeing them dead. That anxiety that I'm sure it just runs around in her brain every day. Like, oh my God, what if something happens to the people I love? And so that scene really hit me on another level because I was like, that is a very anxiety inducing feeling that you are afraid to walk into a house one day and find all of your loved ones dead in their beds. Like and they show it, like Brian Bertino doesn't really hold back. This movie, if anything, was a little withholding in those moments. Like maybe it could have gone a little farther, But that's the thing that I thought was the best scare.
No, I agree, and that was a really good one. And I think that's where we kind of saw Polly, in a way, wake up to her own character, like how she had kind of like her self-loathing had detached her from the people she loved. Like I said early in the movie, her mom calls to check on her before the thing shows up, and she's just like kind of ignoring her mom. Like, I know, mom. Like, almost like placating everything her mom says. When her mom's like trying to genuinely show care and compassion and like, I want you to succeed, that kind of energy. Not like condescending, but like a genuine, like, I want you to do well kind of thing. Like she was supporting her. And Polly's just like, yeah, whatever. Like, whatever. Your mom. Like, I don't care. And when it was to that harrowing moment when she thought she lost her family, Polly kind of wakes up and she's like, fuck. Like, I've been ignoring the people who love me. They're there for me every minute. They're trying to support me. And I'm just like, just like ignoring them. Like, I'm very despondent to them. And so I thought that was really good. So I agree. Like, that's a terrifying thought of coming home and finding your family dead. And I think we all live with this, just like any death in a family or death of a friend, you're like, what didn't I say to them?
Right.
And I think Polly has that moment where she's like, fuck, like, I didn't tell my niece I loved her enough. I didn't tell my sister I loved her for giving me a house that I can't afford, and she's charging me no rent, and she clearly cares about me. Those things all bubble to the surface for Polly at that moment. She's like, oh my God, like, they're gone, and I'm never going to be able to fix what I did or how I treated them or how they didn't know how much I truly loved them and they meant to me. I think that's what made it so anxiety inducing.
Absolutely.
Patrick, next category, remake, sequel, or leave it alone. Now, this is a category where we basically take whatever movie we're reviewing and we say, should they remake it, should they sequelize it, or should they leave it alone? When it comes to Vicious, where do we sit on this one? Because it's not a movie you and I didn't dislike it. I didn't love it. I didn't dislike it, but I certainly I didn't dislike it, I didn't hate it. Um, so it's kind of like middle of the road for me. So where do you fall
Yeah.
in this whole debate? Is it a remake? Is it a sequel? Or is it leave it alone?
Damon, it's a Rennie Harlan remake. Vicious Chapter 1 and 2 and 3. No, I'm kidding. I think it is still a remake though. Give it back to Brian Bertino and say, just make this shit scarier. Just go to whatever fucked up place you were in when you did The Dark and the Wicked and do that here. That's what I think. I think this movie just needs to be scarier. I think, and that was the strange part about it for me was I was like, Brian Bertino is a guy who showed me new ways to be scared, and now I'm seeing what feels like a retread of not just those scares, because it did feel like I felt like little elements of Dark and the Wicked, just less scary, and elements of like a lot of psychological horror that I'm seeing everywhere. And that's not something I'm used to with Brian Bertino. I'm used to him setting the new standard for what it means to be scary. He did it with The Strangers back in the early 2000s, and he did it again with The Dark and the Wicked, and he crushed it. He was very, very good there. So I want a remake, and I want it scarier. Do I know how to get there? I'm not about to tell Brian Bertino how to do that. I would have no clue. But if he has any questions, yeah, maybe he and I have to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree remake and just tweaks. I don't think it needs to be total changes, just tweaks. I think the entity would be a big one for me. Like adding in the constant threat of the entity, I think that would be something just so you have more of somebody physical to play off of in those moments versus just like a phone call or a TV screen popping on and like some weird video. Like, give me that entity in the room with her, whether that, and the entity can change. It could become her mom, it could become her dead dad, it could become her niece, whatever. But in those moments, like having someone to play off of, I think it would have really helped Dakota Fanning in this movie. And I think it would have induced a little bit more dread, that kind of feeling of that tension and dread that just kind of isn't there because it's just Dakota Fanning acting off a phone call. And not, by the way, and this is a movie you mentioned in like the isolated films, like one person kind of shows. A movie like Phone Booth, which I actually really like that movie, Colin Farrell, and it's him talking to Kiefer Sutherland on the phone, who's playing the phone on the other end of the voice. But every action is there's people coming at Colin Farrell in the phone booth. So he's never
Yes.
like, even though he's by himself, he's never really by himself. And that's kind of what this film was missing. Like, he just didn't have that outside force. Like, whether that is the old woman coming back more often or her parent or her mom coming over to the house or whatever, just having more things to react to, I think would have helped this movie.
I fully agree.
Patrick, next category. Can we survive this horror film? This is the category where you and I put ourselves into the movie and we say, if we were in the same situation, would we make it out alive? Patrick, I'm going to go first on this one. I'm going to tell you why I do make it out of this movie alive. Do you want to know why?
Tell me.
That old lady ain't getting in the fucking house. I know that sounds so simplistic, and I know it goes back to my haunted house thing, like, just leave the house. I'm not saying this to be cruel, and I'm certainly not critiquing Brian Bertino's storytelling. A lot of people are nicer than me. And if an old woman, this woman looked like she's probably in her 80s, showed up looking a little, like I said, maybe a little senile, whatever, I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. Here, stand on the porch. I'll call you help, and they'll be there in a minute. I'll close the door. I'm sorry. I'm just not that person. Like, I'm not uncaring, but if I don't know you and you just show up randomly at my door at like whatever it was, like 10 o'clock at night, and you're like, I don't know where I am. I'm like, well, you're certainly not going to find out in the fuck here. Stay on the porch. I'll call you help, stay there. So I know I'm not trying to make a joke, but I am being like, there's zero chance that person's getting into my house. So maybe she chucks the fucking box in the door and just walks away. But otherwise, you ain't getting in the fucking house.
I never let anybody in my house that I don't know. I just don't. Never, ever, ever. And I got one of those cameras right at the door so that if someone wants to do that, I just go, hey, I'm not home. So sorry, can't help you. If you need me to call the cops for you, I will. But Damon, I'll play the game here. I'll say that the box got into my house. She set it off. I got to do these things. I can do it. Damon. And I'll tell you why. Because unlike Polly, I've got a little bit of the training. And, Polly didn't have it. She has to learn it by the end of the movie. And that's good. That's what you want. You want a character to start one way and end another and kind of beat the things that were beating them. And that's exactly what happens to Polly. But I already got the training. She had to get the training the hard way. I'm going to get the training the other way where they go, you need to put this thing in the box. And I'm going to go, bitch, I don't need to do shit. And I'm going to put that box outside, and that box is never going to get fed by me because that box is not telling me what to do. It's absolutely not going to tell me what to do. I'll let the hourglass run out. And that's what she had to do. She had to watch the hourglass expire to realize nothing was going to happen to her. She just had to say no. I'm very good at saying no. I love saying no, Damon. And I want everyone out there to say no a little bit more. Okay. Obviously, yes to the good things, but to the things that are trying to like pull you down, the things that are trying to wear you down, you can say no. You can do it. I've said no to people that you would go, you said no to them for that? Why? Trust me, we're all better for it. You got to say no sometimes. So yes, Damon, I'm surviving this horror film.
And that's also, to your point, that's also why, like, the entity would have been an effective extra layer to this movie, because it's harder to say no when there's literally a creepy fucking demon in your face saying you better do this. Like,
yes.
If it's just a box and a phone call, you're like, yeah, there's no real threat there. But, like, when you actually have, like, a creepy thing in your face saying you better do this, you're more apt to be like, oh shit, I better do this, because it's a threat. There's really no threat. And I think that's what kind of takes it away from this movie. And that leads perfectly into our final category, which is it scary? And I'll say, Patrick, my biggest problem with this movie is that it's not really particularly scary. And that's a problem when it's a Brian Bertino horror film, when he is incredibly adept at scaring the shit out of me. The Strangers is one of these scariest movies of the last 20 years. I don't care. That movie is fucking harrowing. Dark and the Wicked, we've just sat here and, fully filleted that movie all over again tonight on the podcast.
Happy to.
I'm here to tell you Vicious isn't bad. But I think my biggest problem, beyond the whole isolated, like one person playing off another, playing off nobody and not having the entity in the room, those kind of things, that also speaks to the bigger problem, which is it's just not really scary. It doesn't really hit you in that way, and I think that's what's missing. This is a horror movie that doesn't really feel horrific.
Exactly. I echo everything you're saying there. It's just the scares are a little too standard. They're things you've seen before and that you know how they're coming. Maybe a jump scare here or there, but honestly, it's not hitting on that level. Not a scary movie. It's a deep movie, and I think it succeeds at the things that it's trying to get across. The one thing it fails at is to scare you.
I'm going to say the parent thing, Patrick, and Brian Bertino. I'm sorry I have to do this to you, buddy. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
I'm just disappointed. Again, I want to be clear. I like this movie. I just don't love it. I think it's a good movie. It's not a great movie. And guess what? If you have Paramount Plus, it's there at the house. You can check it out right now.
Well, when I say disappointed, I mean about the scares. I'm like, yeah, it's just disappointing with the scares.
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Listen, listen. I know, but again, very high bar. It's hard to meet that bar every single time. I don't envy people going. Brian Bertino is one of the scariest motherfuckers out there because then he has to live up to that. That's hard. That's hard to do. And so he did his best this time. It just wasn't scary.
Yeah, but like I said, try again, and I'm sure he'll try again, and maybe the next one will affect us the way the Dark and the Wicked and the Strangers did. And like I said, he doesn't have a bad batting average because I'm certainly not going to punt on this one. I'm not going to say it's a bad movie. I'm not saying I wouldn't watch it again. I'm just saying it's just not his best work, which will happen. Patrick, that's our episode for this week. Obviously, as I already mentioned, we're going to be doing The Black Phone 2 as our next episode. I think that's going to be a big one. Everyone is very excited about the sequel. It feels like a totally different film from the original, so I'm pretty excited to see it. It looks a little Nightmare on Elm Street, and my opinion on that movie and that franchise. So The Black Phone 2 will be our next episode. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the podcast. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Over on our YouTube channel, just search Rewind of the Living Dead on YouTube. You'll find us over there. And over on the website, rewindofthelivingdead.com. I post all the new episodes over there, as well as news, reviews that you don't hear on the podcast, trailers, all kinds of good stuff. So check out rewindofthelivingdead.com. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want early access to episodes and access to episodes that aren't on the regular podcast feed, like our Alien Earth recaps, like our non-spoiler or non-horror reviews, patreon.com/Rewind of the Living Dead doesn't cost much. It helps support us financially for the show, but it also gives you extra access to some cool shit that you wouldn't get otherwise. So do that. If you got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, hit us up anytime on email, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That is livingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on you can also find us on social media, of course, Instagram, Twitter/X, and Facebook. Just once again, search Rewind of the Living Dead, and you will find us over there. You can send us messages. We always try to respond and reply, so please hit us up there. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you then.